Welcome to week 4, guys. We are at the halfway point. We're moving into week 4. I'm really excited about the topic this week because even if this isn't within your journey specifically now at this point, we all get to this point. We all get to the point where we feel we've been on a rise. We've spoken in the past few videos about being motivated, feeling great, and things are kind of working for us. Motivation kicks in and we don't need a certain amount of discipline. It's kind of, we self-disciplined, and then we hit that plateau. So that can be in the sense of losing motivation, and that can also be in the sense of you feel like you get to a point where you stagnate. So you've experienced really good results up until this point, and then we get to a point where we feel like we just plateau and we're not necessarily gaining traction or results that we have in the past. This is a serious topic to talk about because that leads us to become very despondent. That leads us to kind of realize, well, okay, I'm putting all this effort in the same as I was before. Nothing's happening. So our minds automatically go to like, oh, what's the point? Let me just backslide, or we unintentionally backslide, and we start that cycle again. So today what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about getting to that point of a plateau, and we're going to talk about some practical ways in how we can overcome that plateau. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to talk about is adjusting your calorie intake. It's a fairly straightforward concept, but let's say, for example, I weigh 100 kilos. I need a certain amount of calories to sustain myself through my daily activities as well as my exercise. Let's say that's 2,000 calories. I put myself in a deficit, and now I get some really good results and I lose 10 kilos. Now, the simple concept around this is I've lost weight and therefore I have less mass to move around. And therefore I need to make sure that as I lose weight and as I burn, or I'm more efficient at utilizing and burning energy, I need to adjust those calories to ensure that I'm still staying within a deficit to promote weight loss. Another thing that we can focus on is a lot of the time we stay in a calorie deficit. We've spoken about focusing on protein, but we can spend a little bit more time focusing on good quality foods. We can focus on making sure we're eating the right amount of foods, we're eating enough nutrients, enough vegetables, enough good whole proteins, making sure we're eating food that not only is counting towards calories, but giving us energy to burn more, move more, be more active, feel better or feel more fueled, and therefore potentially burn more calories in essence. Another really great one is rotating our routine or changing up our routine. And that's going to be part of our health challenge this week. But changing our routine is essential. We often get stuck in a rut. And let's say your method of losing weight, I'm going to keep this simple, but you run 5Ks a day and that's what you do. Your body gets used to running 5Ks a day. And yes, it can still have a tremendous amount of positive benefits, but sometimes we need to change things up because your body gets very efficient at doing that exercise, and therefore it's less effective in the long run. So we want to change the routine up, and this is why obviously, I obviously speak highly of CrossFit all the time, but that's why something like CrossFit is so great, because we stay away from routine. You keep your body guessing. But with regards to this health challenge specifically this week, with regards to changing up our routine, I'm going to encourage you guys to kind of do something other than what we've been doing over the last 3 weeks, but we'll talk about that in a moment. Another one is mindless munching. So mindless munching, just a simple concept and simple term. We often overestimate the amount of calories that we consume on a daily basis. We basically, sometimes without even realizing it, we just pick foods while we're preparing food, and we don't necessarily count those calories, or we become less aware of those calories and intentional about the additional calories that we're eating on a daily basis. So we're going to get into another health challenge this week, as I spoke about last week, and it's basically getting to the point of tracking everything, tracking all of our food that we consume, and being incredibly mindful of what we're consuming, how much we're consuming. And even, I don't condone tracking. It's very strenuous, it's tedious, but it is a good tool to use even for a very short period of time to give you a very good idea of not overestimating the amount of calories we eat and making sure that we can stay within our parameters. So another one, guys, that we can talk about this week, also part of the health challenge, is basically being intentional about getting good quality sleep. So there's a lot of factors around this, but not only the factors of kind of just feeling better, feeling more efficient. If, for example, keep this simple, if I have a bad night of sleep, I'm probably going to be more lethargic the next day. I'm going to be a little bit more lazy, less likely to train. I'm going to make an excuse as to why I didn't sleep well. So we're going to be intentional about making sure we get good quality sleep to just make sure that we feel good and we feel energized. We spoke about BMR. If I'm more active or I feel more energized within my day, I'm more likely to fidget, I'm more likely to move, and that accounts for most of the calories that I burn within any given day. Not to mention the hormones related to that. Obviously, cortisol is a big one. It's a stress hormone. Good quality sleep helps just reduce this. We've got appetite hormones as well, so called ghrelin and leptin, And those basically play around with your hormones due to a lack of sleep or a variety of reasons, and it increases your hunger or decreases your hunger or your feeling of hunger. And obviously that plays a massive role in the amount of calories we consume. Obviously, ideally, we don't really want to be feeling hungry throughout the entire day. And then obviously we spoke last week about tracking protein. So now we're going to utilize MyFitnessPal. I see a lot of guys have been using it on the group already. And I want you to track everything. And this is only going to be for a week. This isn't one of those pillars that we add to the foundation and we say, okay, from now on we track. Again, I don't really like tracking, but I do think it has its place if you do it just for a week and look back in that week and just be aware and be mindful of like, wait a minute, now that I tracked, I'm actually eating way more than I thought, or I'm eating way less than I thought, or whatever it may be. But I want you to try and make an effort or concerted effort to log all of your food, and obviously post that on the group. That's part of the health challenge, and that's going to give us a good idea, as well as making sure that we kind of pretty accurate in those balances. You know, when we hit that plateau, we often get to the point where we're like, but I'm eating well. But are you really eating well? Tracking gives you that data and saying, I am eating well, I'm tracking my food. Now, this is the calories I consumed this week, so I am eating well. It must be something else. We've spoken about hydration. Obviously, week 2, we had a challenge of drinking 2 liters of water. Again, same principles as before, making sure that often feelings of hunger is actually thirst. So we want to kind of stick to that as much as we can. And that could be a big role in making sure that our body just stays hydrated. We stay feeling full when we actually thirsty instead of hungry, and that could be a way to reduce calories overall. Okay, so the next one I'm going to talk about is obviously building muscle. And now this is a topic that I love to talk about, especially with ladies. A lot of the times ladies feel as though they don't want to lift weights because they don't want to get big and bulky. Now, I think I've used this analogy before, but the same way of a woman feeling as though she's going to get too big and bulky is the same way that I feel like I might accidentally become a race car driver by just driving around in my car every single day. That's actually likened to the same concept of a lady lifting weights and thinking she's automatically going to get big. Doesn't work like that. The ladies who you see who are big like that spend an enormous amount of effort and time and resources and energy. Their diet is on point. They're probably using substances as well. Not to say that they are, but it's kind of insulting to some of the ladies who have worked incredibly hard to get to where they are, for us to be like, I don't really want to lift weights because I don't want to look like that. They look like that because they've worked really, really hard. Now, there's a huge amount of benefits to lifting weights, specifically for ladies, for men and for ladies. But we spoke about your routine is a 5K run. That's cool. You burn calories while you run, but lifting weights has an afterburn effect, which basically means you lift weights, you've got something called DOMS, which is delayed onset of muscle stiffness. And that means you can continue to burn calories for up to 24 hours after you've finished training. So when I run, I burn calories while I run. When I'm at rest, I go back to rest. Whereas if I do exercise, like high intensity exercise, or I lift weights and I've got that stiffness, my calorie burning is elevated for an extended period of time and I'm burning more calories. Not to mention, the more muscle you have, the more calories you burn. So this goes hand in hand with lifting weights and then making sure that we're eating enough protein because of that thermic effect of food that we spoke about. When you eat protein, you're more full for a longer period of time, and also protein or burns more calories through digestion. So we're at the point of the challenge now where you guys should feel pretty comfortable and familiar with the Gritbox classes. Now, it's not to say that you have to do CrossFit to lift weights, because we do weightlifting in the Gritbox classes, as you've seen. We just use dumbbells and we use kettlebells. So if you don't really want to migrate across to CrossFit, that's fine. But I challenge you this week, don't be fearful of the weights. Maybe go a little bit heavier than you've done in the past. Focus a little bit more. Come to our flex and flow classes on a Thursday. And if you do feel confident, jump across into the CrossFit classes. Obviously, then we do isolated movements like back squats, deadlifts, presses, and that kind of thing, which is incredibly good for exactly what we've been speaking about, building muscle and lifting weights and the positive benefits that come with that. It's fairly rough things, guys, but if you hit that plateau, again, everything that we speak about here, it's not to say that one thing is going to now make a difference. All of a sudden, my sleep has changed, and that's been a magic difference. That might not be the case. But if I take some of these points that I've mentioned, even just one or two of them, and I put them into practice and basically compound those efforts, all of them together could potentially make the difference that we need and get to the breakthrough that we need. And obviously, you guys probably have seen as well, sometimes it's just a case of we can't always rely on motivation. We can't rely on motivation. And a lot of us get to the point where we're like, I'm not feeling motivated. I need to get back into it. Discipline has to come into play. So we have to make sure that we hold ourselves accountable and we are disciplined in training. Motivation is not going to get you anywhere. It's going to get you so far, but we need to hold ourselves responsible and say, if I've scheduled myself to train, there's nothing that's going to make me not train and I make it that much of a priority and that important. Okay, so moving on to our health challenges for this week. I've got one or two that we're going to talk about. The first one, as I mentioned, tracking on MyFitnessPal, tracking everything that we consume, making sure that we log all our foods, whether it be actual meals or snacks, but track everything. I only want you to do this for 1 week. If you have the personality type that you continue to do it afterwards and you enjoy it, that's awesome. But for the rest of us, 1 week, that's all I'm asking, just to give yourself a good idea of how much you actually consuming. The second thing is basically being very intentional about our sleep, being intentional about the amount of sleep we get to help relieve stress and just to help us feel like we have more energy. Obviously, there's a number of ways we can do this. I'm sure you've seen many of them, but try and stay away from screen time late and just before you go to bed. Try and see if you can switch off in some way, get yourself to rest. If you say, I want to sleep by 9 o'clock, by 8:30, try and calm down and just relax a little bit. Maybe read a book, do whatever you need to do that helps you to relax so that you could potentially sleep more soundly, and just kind of put things in place that are a little bit more intentional. For most of us, unless you have a real problem with sleeping, that's just a case of being disciplined and going to bed a little earlier, especially if you know you have to wake up at a certain time. So you can work back. Everyone's different, but the general rule of thumb is we want to try and shoot for about 8 hours per night. The third thing of our health challenge next week is going to be doing something out of the ordinary, changing up your routine. So that could look different for everyone. I will message you in the group on 1 or 2 days next week, and I'll say, guys, we're going to go for a run at 5 o'clock or 3 o'clock, whatever it may be. If you can make it, you can make it. If you can't, you can't. That's fine. We'll give it a few opportunities, and we'll just do a nice, easy run, something different for you. Get a group of people, go play a game of paddle, do something that you wouldn't ordinarily do. If we want to try and arrange to potentially do a park run next week, Saturday, let's do a park run. If you've been doing only grit box for the last 3 to 4 weeks, try a CrossFit class, try a boxing class, try the flex and flow class, take an old buddy, go do something else, go for a hike, do something out of your routine, get outdoors, try and do something that just shuffles things up a little bit and keeps the journey enjoyable. Then moving on to our physical challenge. We've got a nice spicy one this week. We've done our steps with regards to walking, our actual steps. This week, we're going to focus on steps. So climbing up steps, stairs count. I want to mention that stairs count, but our goal is to see if we can aim for 2,000 steps within Monday to Sunday, 2,000 steps. And it's not step ups on the high box, it's short steps. So again, staircases count. Often your watch that records your steps could potentially record your steps as well. Have a look. If it doesn't, you'll have to manually just keep track. It's 285 steps a day. That can be done at a staircase, or come to the gym before or after your class. Take one of the small boxes, and you're going to just work through your steps. And the goal is to get through 285 steps a day, or obviously if you need to do more on some days, as long as we get our 2,000 by the end of the week. Guys, I hope you're enjoying the journey so far. Again, sustainability, I'm going to say that every week. Let's make sure that we're taking some of these habits. Some of them you're going to find more difficult than others, but let's make sure we're taking some of these habits, we're compounding them together, and we're incorporating them into our lifestyle so that it can be sustainable and we enjoy the process. The rewards will come. If you haven't felt like you've made progress up to now, maybe this week's the breakthrough. Maybe we're going to change things up a little bit and you're going to start to see it. But remember, these things take time as well. We're impatient as human beings. We want results now, and unfortunately, it doesn't always work like that. So let's be patient, let's persevere, but it's most important to enjoy the process so that we don't mind if it takes a little longer. And I can guarantee you the weight's going to stay off for a lot longer. Have a great week, guys, and I will see you at the box.